Results are in. Pistons, wrist pins weighed. We have our results. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. Today, all about pistons and trying to get these weights as close as we can. I got out here bright and early and started weighing out my pistons and my wrist pins. I have them all numbered so they don't get mixed up. And those numbers are going to correspond to the connecting rods as well too. So connecting rod number 1, we'll go with piston number 1 and so on and so forth, just to make sure that we keep them all together and we keep our weights as balanced as possible. So I've weighed these out and done the wrist pins well too. Wrist pins, theoretically, they're basically all the same. They're all within even though some are 2/10 off, because it could be the high end of a tenth and a low end of a tenth, they're basically identical. There's not much I can do with those anyway, because I won't be grinding them. They are what they are. Now for the pistons, I do have a light one. I have an extreme light one at 77.5. And then, of course, my heaviest one at 781. So I have quite a bit of material to take off this one to make it the lowest, and all the others will need a little bit of touching up as well too. But I put my wrist pins and pistons, I mix match them all to get a final measurement, but because these are so close to the same, and it's easier to weigh a larger mass than it is a small one, they basically just came out to the same difference in weights. So as an assembly, not a big deal, we're not going to worry about it. We're going to set those wrist pins aside and move on. So, weighting these pistons. Now, these are aluminum, 5 grams difference. This is the heavy one. It's gonna be hard to take 5 grams off this piston, and they don't give us much options where to take it from. This is already made to be a lightweight piston. They come in just over a pound with the wrist pin, and that's considered light for this application. But right here in the corners, these little nubs sticking out here, we can take a little bit off of this edge. We can clean a little bit off this edge, and that is really the only spot that we can take weight from. Now, I do have an advantage of these being a forged piston, and as you can see here, on the edge of all sides here, there's a little lip, and it's not not slag. It is smooth. There's no way it could chip off, but there is a raised edge here, and it's right on the piston. This one's actually quite large. I can easily, using the cookie disc, just buff that off there. There's a little bit of one here. This side is fairly smooth, except for that chunk. But a lot of the pistons have it. This one only has a little nub that I can take off. This one has nothing. This actually has a big edge as well too. So there is some room to remove some material, cleaning up the edges of skirting before I actually get into grinding on those large lumps inside. Now this is what I'm talking about when I say we're going to use a cookie. These are just little buffing discs. The brown ones work really well on everything. Now a lot of people use these for removing gasket material off the top of heads and stuff like that, if it's a steel block. These aren't the roughest. I think these are 80 grit, these ones come in at. But what's nice about them is they don't leave large striations, like scratches in the metal when you're done. It does polish it off. But they can be very quick on aluminum, so we're going to have to be careful. So on a die grinder, what I'm going to do is making sure I leave this level to the surface, because I don't want to grind anything on this side at all. I'm just going to buzz this gently, just clean those down that way, all the way around, and see what kind of material I can move, what kind of weight I can change, just by cleaning up these edges first, before I move in with a burr bit and clean those corners. Piston number 4, 775.1. It was 781.4, and I am dead on the money to my lightest piston. So my heaviest piston is now matched my lightest piston. Sorry about that little flip around for the video there, but anyway, let's get a closer look here. So again, this was the heaviest piston. Get it to focus hopefully nicely here. There we go. You can see I used that cookie disc just to clean down these edges. Now I did go down all four as even as I could, and it made a big difference. I was able to get rid of almost 5 grams off that, so it worked out really good. And of course, I did my best to stay away from the edge. You can still see that little change in color where the original taper was that was on there when it came from Iggy's, and it looks really good. It is really smooth. Now every other one didn't have to do as much as course, but you can see where I've touched all the way around each piston, and these are all within 1/10 to 2/10 of a gram off, and good to go. Now there is a couple spots where when using the cookie disc, it is square with this outside edge. The grind came to the edge, and it makes just like a kind of like a burr feeling right on the edge of it, and that's what I have these for. This is actually a set of jeweler's files. There's so many, every one of these is a different shape, from teardrops to wedges, triangles, squares, flats. This is the one I like to use the most. Unfortunately, the tip is broke off. But this one here is about a 300 grit. And what I do is on about a 60-degree angle, just so lightly work my way into the piston, to the bottom of the skirt, just a little bit along this edge, just to make sure there's no curl or anything here that might drag on the cylinder wall. Because the tolerance between this piston and the block is quite close. It's 0.002 of an inch. That's the tolerance that's on there, and what I asked for, and it came in perfect. So this is now ready to go. I have them all cleaned up, and my next step is to start getting ready to make the jig to put these wrist pins and connecting rods together. Now, one thing I'll show you is when I went through and reweighted these pistons, and I ended up getting them like almost dead on, all within perfect. This guy here, this was the second one I did. Number 4, the heaviest I started off, and I got lucky. I got nice and close. When I was doing number 7, though, it looked like there wasn't much material coming off, but just kind of shows you how fast it goes. I went from 775.2, and I thought, yeah, just buzz that a little bit, just a little cleaning, and then I'm past it, down to 774.9. Now, I'm not going to go back through or do all these pistons. 1, it takes too long. And 2, really, this is not that bad. This could be on the high end of the 0.9 just because I can't measure past the tenths, which means it would be a 77.5. Maybe it's right there. Maybe it's a 998, somewhere's close. You never know. And then it's only 1/10 off from the lowest. So it's close enough, good enough for the girls we go with, and perfect for the street-worthy rod. So now we're getting down to the technical stuff. We gotta get into the maths. More maths than just weighing. Sorry about that. But it is now time to get ready to make the jig that I'm going to use to put all this together. Now, I apologize to my American viewers here. I do have a bilingual tape measure out, and I got a bilingual caliper because we will be doing this in millimeters. I just find it easy to work with those numbers. Not just that I'm a Canadian, but the fact that I find it's easier to break down a number when I'm splitting things in half than going through fractions. So the measurements we're looking for here is the total length of the wrist pin, the gap inside the piston, the gap on the outside of the piston, and also this insert that fits underneath here where the wrist pin kind of sits, and the thickness of the con rod. So I've gone through here and I've marked them all down. Of course, I got our piston width, wrist pin, connecting rod. This is that inset. This is where it drops in under the skirt here. So 8 millimeters each side for a total of 16 millimeters. Now, this distance in here is 39 millimeters, and that is what we're subtracting the thickness of the connecting rod from, because this will sit right in here. And we need this distance to be equal on each side. So if we take the con rod and remove it from the total gap that's inside the piston here, we're down to 11.5 millimeters. Divide that by 2. 5.75 millimeters is my exact gap I need on each side of the connecting rod. Now, this distance is important, that 5.75, because when I go and put this all together, it's going to be too hard to hold this con rod dead center while I'm waiting for everything to set up. So as you can see, I've put a little dot, a little line here. That's the 5.75 millimeter spot. And we're just going to slide this through right to the edge. Now that gives us our offset, which is this connecting rod tight to the inside of the piston, so that when everything's done and I move this back to center, once it gets assembled, you know, the end of the connecting rod will be on the crank and the piston will be centered in the bore from the piston rings. That'll make that dead center, and I don't have to worry about the wrist pin protruding past the side of the piston and touching and coming in contact with the cylinder wall. Now it is still a little bit, see if we can get her here, you can see it's still behind, so worst case scenario, if you ever bent a rod and it went to the side, yeah, you're going to do some damage in your cylinder, but at least that wrist pin isn't dragging down the side of it. So now comes the task of building a jig that is accurate and repeatable. I got to be able to, it's got to work 8 times flawlessly, because I really only get one chance to do this. So what's going to happen is my pistons, they will be at a little above room temperature, probably about 27 degrees. The wrist pins, they're actually going to be sitting in dry ice, so they're going to be about minus 78 degrees Celsius. I can get dry ice from my local drugstore. And then the end of my connecting rods, we'll be using a MAP gas, methane, acetylene, propane. I don't know if you've ever seen them in the stores. They're the yellow propane tanks for for running your torches. But we'll be heating up the end of this connecting rod. Now it's not going red. You do not want to go red. You're going to heat this up just till you see a light tinge of blue come into it. It just starts to change color. And then with this assembly in our jig, this will be set in tight to the side. Cold wrist pin will be brought out, and it should just slip straight together. This is what's called interference fit. These connecting rods and wrist pins do not go together. They do not fit. But when this is down to minus 78, it'll shrink. We'll bring this up probably about 250 to 300 degrees, I would think, and it'll expand, and this should just fall straight through. And as everything cools down, hopefully our gauge is set right, so that once this is cooled, I move the connecting rod back to the center of the piston. We should have an equidistant measurement on both sides. So now that we got those maths all taken care of, I've gone through here and I have done one final clean of all the parts, given a little buff on the inside to make sure there's no edges. And I took the time and I built something. Not quite sure what I built, but yeah, I built a contraption. So this, in all its glory, is my jig, heater, and pusher to assemble the wrist pin, the connecting rod, and the piston. So what we got going on here is this is the jig I'm going to use to press my wrist pins in, or I should say push them in. They should go smoothly. And this is the jig that's going to make them all be perfect and all exactly the same, so I can repeat this process 8 times without having any issues. So all I've got here is a piece of 2x6. Got a couple bolts cranked into this this piece of wood here as well. These here, 2 small clamps. They're my rubber bushing. It's putting a little pressure on that piston, which is lining them up tight against the base here on both sides, and there is no movement at all in this piston. Now the measurement I was talking about, to get an equal distance for this connecting rod to be in here. That's what this jig is for here, and this bolt. So I've measured every single piston, every rod, every wrist pin, every piston. So I know everything is identical, so I don't have to keep going back and forth and adjusting this. So what I've done is, as this goes through, it comes out and it hits this bolt on the end here. Now that recesses it on this side, 5.75 millimeters. So this side has excess sticking out over here. So that once this is in and cools, when I move it back, it'll be dead center in the middle. I'll have just that 1 millimeter hang on each side. So I'll be using this MAP gas. This is methane acetylene propane. It burns very hot, gives a nice flame. And what we'll be doing is I'll be heating the end of the connecting rods. Now they're gonna get hot, but not red. If I do make this red, then I've basically ruined the rod. All I'm gonna do is heat this up till you get that light shade of brown starting and a little bit of a blue tinge. Once that is hot, it'll be ready for the wrist pin to go through. Now before I do that, you're probably wondering what I got going on here. This is to solve a little bit of a problem or to help prevent a problem. While I was cleaning these pistons, these wrist pins going in and out, what I've found are some of them are a little tighter than others going through the piston themselves, and it doesn't seem to matter which one they go in. Some of the pistons just have a little bit tighter tolerance. Now they all fit through by hand, but I want to make sure that there's no friction and no issue at all. It's just in and done, one and done. That's the only chance I get to do this. I don't have an option to stop for a second, adjust the pin, and put it through. Once that pin starts going through, that is it. I'm literally going to have 1.5 to 2 seconds to finish this, and that's going to be it. So what I've done is I put this heat and strip gun. This will actually burn a 2x4. It gets hot. It's blowing hot air into this piston, heating up the piston and expanding it. So it's going to make it so the wrist pins go through a lot easier. So I'll be turning the gun on. The piston will start to heat. I'll get my MAP gas going here. Start heating my connecting rod. Wrist pins will be sitting on ice. I was thinking about dry ice and liquid nitrogen, but I did do a little test run just to check. And with these being even at room temperature in the garage, with this heated up, I can quickly drop that in and out. Now, to say I'm nervous about this process is an understatement. These, like I said, these pistons are custom made. I cannot get another one. If I screw up one, I'm pretty sure I'll have to buy a set. I guess they could try their best to match what they did, but when the machines are set up, like I was explained to by the guys at Iggy's here, they set the machine, they'll do the first turn or first grind, one, and then all together, adjust the machine, the next one, so they're perfectly consistent. Yeah, I could probably get one made, but it's not advisable. These are a perfect match set, and I'm at the point now where I've got them all weighed, so unfortunately if it was lighter, well, then I have to go through that whole process again and try to figure that out. But watch videos online. I've kind of gone through the motions. I've checked, double checked, quadruple checked all my measurements. Everything is clean. Really all there is now is just to give it a go and hope for the best. Okay, so we're getting ready to go here. One thing I didn't mention, but these pistons, they're indexed to the front. You see this notch down here? Right at the very bottom. That goes to the front of the engine. Now, also, back when I took my connecting rods out as well too, all the numbers that were stamped, they were in such a way in the engine so that they were facing upwards, easy to see. So with this being piston going to the front, I am working on the left-hand side of the engine, so these numbers need to be towards me. So I have to make sure notch facing the camera, which is to my right, numbers facing me as well, and that'll be the movement I need to make sure everything is aligned the correct way, or at least the way I took it apart. hoping that they were put together correctly the first time. All right, we got everything ready to go. We're gonna start the heat gun here, start getting this piston warmed up while we're heating up the end of the connecting rod. And then hopefully it'll be one smooth movement. We got the pin down here getting cold. It'll be ready to go. Now it's gonna take too long for me to video this whole thing and heat this end. So we're gonna get things going. We'll cut the video and then I'll come back right when she's ready to slap it right in. So here we go. Okay, you can see a little yellow color on that side, and it's just starting to turn a nice blue hue on the other. We are almost ready. Double checking, make sure my marks are going the right way. Wrist pin is cold. Here goes nothing. We're in tight. Pin is against the stop. And connecting rod is against the piston. Whew, that is warm. And that heat is traveling through this connecting rod like crazy. That is it. It is now permanent. We're going to give that a few seconds to cool down here, and then we'll pull it out. So get you a better view here. So this is where I'm saying, going to make sure my connecting rod is tight against my piston. And then of course, the wrist pin is tight against the stop, so that when this is in the engine, and we are nice and even, or we'll just get it close anyway. We're close to it. We got it sticking just a little bit on each side, nice and even. And we got her done. So, you know what that means? 7 more to go. And that, my friends, brings it to an end of assembling these pistons and connecting rods. Whew, what a job. Some nerve-wracking moments. Piston number 5, I actually went to shove it in and I pulled it right back out again. Just in my mind, something told me it didn't feel right, so I just reheated that rod just to make sure. So they all have that nice blue tinge. Everything went smooth. Everything is nice and even, right where it should be. And that is the end of today's video. So, thank you so much for stopping by. Thumbs up is greatly appreciated. Geez, you know what? Why don't you even subscribe if you liked what you saw? Maybe we can learn some new stuff together. Hope maybe you learned something today. Anyway, catch you guys again later.